Okay, everyone, welcome to the Black and Intellectual YouTube channel. So I said I was going to make a video giving an update about what's going on in South Africa, and so I'm basically following through on that with this video. I made that statement a couple of videos ago when I was talking about a different issue. So let's get started with this. And I'm gonna try to make this a short video because I think it's more important to push back against the lies of about what's going on in South Africa, and how dangerous those lies are, and sort of what might be going on behind closed doors. And I'm going to briefly touch on what's really going on and what the South African land reclamation issue is really all about. So 5 months ago, I made a video detailing the vote within the South African Parliament to reclaim the land stolen by black people, or stolen from black people generations ago by white colonizers. The video is in, my top 5. It's one of my top 5 most popular uploads. Fast forward to 2 days ago. I'm recording this as of the 24th. I'm going to try to put it up today. It might go up tomorrow, which is going to be the 25th. But fast forward to the 22nd, which as of the recording of this video was 2 days ago. And listen to what Donald Trump posted on Twitter. He said, I have asked Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, to closely study the South Africa land and farm seizures and expropriations and the large-scale killing of farmers, which isn't happening. And then he said, quote, South African government is now seizing land from white farmers. And then he quotes Tucker Carlson and Fox News. Now, even though I haven't posted another video about this particular story in South Africa in some months, that doesn't mean the far-right racists haven't continued their erroneous lies about white genocide throughout the same time period, because they have. They've been going on and on and on, and here's the problem with this. This is not something that a small, tiny minority of people are watching. Okay, this is something that's getting millions of clicks, hundreds of thousands, millions of clicks. Once it gets to the point where it's on Fox News, you are talking about millions of people. And most importantly, once it gets on Fox News and certain shows on Fox News, Trump is watching that, because that's all he does. He just sits in front of the TV all day. He doesn't actually do his job as president of the United States. Because the bar is set so low for him, he's allowed to do that and get away with it. Whereas another president, like, say, for instance, Barack Obama, would never be allowed to just piss off the job of president of the United States and still actually sit in that office and be taken seriously. But that's something Donald Trump, a white conservative, a far-right president, is allowed to do and allowed to get away with. The big difference now is they've been able to get this lie that began on white supremacist websites, okay, purely just began as a white supremacist lie about white genocide, okay. You've seen that go from those websites, those neo-Nazi websites, okay, onto Fox News. Okay, and once it hits Fox News, it's like I said a second ago, it's only a matter of time before Trump tweets something stupid about it. Okay, so we can clearly see how white supremacy is influencing White House foreign policy. Okay, this is the world we're living in right now. We are living under essentially a white supremacist regime for all intents and purposes. Okay, within the United States. So what's really going on in South Africa? We'll understand first and foremost that much of the white-owned Western media are thoroughly biased. A lot of what you read from these articles, you can read the articles to gain some sort of insight, but you have to kind of go out of your way to look for South African sources of information, because a lot of the stuff that you see being put out by Western media, companies and things like that, it's going to have a slant to it. It's going to have an anti-land reform bias. So just keep that in mind. That's why I read a lot of articles in the preparation for this video a lot of these articles that I just didn't include in this video. I'm not even quoting them in this video because you can just read the bias and you can read the slant as you're reading those articles. And I don't include that type of information in my videos. What people don't realize is that under the right-wing fascist apartheid government of the past, black South Africans, all of them, okay, were isolated to only about a tenth of the land. Okay, meaning the other overwhelming, 90% of the land was owned and occupied by the white South Africans and the white South African government. Now, that's changed some since the end of apartheid, but South Africa still has the issue of black people being isolated and squeezed onto land far away from work, far away from urban centers, and most importantly, far away from the land that is the most profitable. Okay, and that's a problem. That's not something that you can kind of just... It would be a dereliction of duty for the leaders of South Africa to have black people, isolated onto these shanty towns, and in these shanty towns, isolated into these quarters, just basically herded into these population centers. Okay, while the white people are owning all of the profitable land, they're still making all of the money, and they're predominantly making most of the money in the country. That's not something you can keep in place, okay, and still be, a good leader of your country. You have to do something for your people at some point in time. And the South African government, they realize that. The ANC, the African National Congress, realizes that. The EFF, the Economic Freedom Fighters, most importantly, they definitely understand that. So the current move to reclaim that land is about enriching the black South African people. Any interpretation of what you see going on in South Africa right now that doesn't mention that is engaging in a certain level of bias, maybe a little bit of bias or a lot of bias, but they're not telling the whole side of the story. This is about enriching the black South African people, allowing them to spread out, and allowing them to build homes and build their own farms and have some sort of a respectable, sustainable living for not just the soup, because you do have black people in South Africa who are wealthy and have some level of upward mobility, okay, but they're in the minority. Okay, this is about helping out the majority of black people, or at least more of the black people who have been helped out previously in the past. Okay, and people kind of just want to ignore that because people want to keep the apartheid, essentially the impacts of the apartheid system in place. They want to keep black people where they are, the majority of black people poor, and they're still keeping their wealth, they're still keeping their land, and everybody else is just poor. So you still have a minority of people who are sucking up the majority of the wealth. And honestly, that doesn't just happen in South Africa. That happens all over the continent. That happens in the United States. Okay, so an element of this, because and I don't really go into this in this video, but the economic freedom fighters, when you're talking about them, when you're talking about Malema and some of these other folks, you're talking about, a socialist Marxist. You're talking about a very strong leftist interpretation, an anti-capitalist interpretation on progress and how to move forward for black people in that country. So part of this is about making sure socialism and Marxism doesn't gain too much of a foothold in South Africa, and making sure that capitalism maintains some dominance in that country. And then another part of it is definitely racial as well. There is a big difference between what the EFF, led by Julius Malema, like I said earlier, wants to do and how they want to go about implementing land reform, and what Cyril Ramaphosa, the president of South Africa, what he wants to do and how he wants to do it. And of course, Ramaphosa leads the ANC, the African National Congress. Okay, so here's what Ramaphosa has said is the truth versus the lies that you've seen stoked by foreign white supremacists. like those on Fox News and even outside of Fox News. Ramaphosa wants the quick release, and this, what I'm about to say, you can easily, go to YouTube, pull up videos of Ramaphosa and what he says he wants to do, and watch the videos of him, and watch the videos of what Malema wants to do. Okay, so it's very easy to find this information. It's not hard at all. Okay, you just have to go to the source and not read some of these articles, these biased articles. Ramaphosa wants he wants the quick release of publicly owned land. Okay, that is very important. He wants the quick release of publicly owned land. Now, privately owned land is a bit more tricky. What he has said local governments, what we in America would call states, local governments, he wants them to examine privately owned land too, because some of that stuff is purely just up for speculation. Some of it is actually not being used and is just sitting there kind of derelict. But it's privately owned though. So it's not publicly owned land, it's privately owned, but they want to examine that stuff too and see, okay, some of this stuff we might be able to reclaim as well. That's sort of, if you read between the lines, that's kind of what I'm interpreting and what I'm understanding, but they kind of have to, at least Ramaphosa kind of has to watch his words, because he knows that the World Bank and foreign investors, the IMF, and these white supremacists in the United States, he knows people outside of South Africa is watching this closely, and most importantly, he knows that the EFF, they have a different interpretation on how to handle the privately owned land versus the ANC. Okay, so he's kind of politicking it up a little bit, but what the ANC is not calling for are wholesale land grabs, where they just come in and jack people's property. And that's kind of been the interpretation that that foreigners have put on, white foreigners have put on this agenda, this land reclamation agenda. Okay, so Ramaphosa's come out and said that's not true. That's not what we're doing. There's a tremendous amount of propaganda being stoked against this decision, because white colonizers don't want black people anywhere on the continent to change the racist decisions of the past. People have to understand something about white supremacy. At the heart of it is the belief that racist people and the decisions that they made to oppress others should never be held accountable for what they've done in the past. A lot of people do not believe in holding racist people accountable. Okay, that is a major tenet of white supremacy. You cannot believe in holding racist decisions of the past accountable, because white people currently today benefit from those racist decisions of the past. Okay, and if you try to change those decisions from the past, that means that a lot of the power that white people have today, is balanced out. I'm not going to say it's lost, but it's balanced out. Okay, and if white society has been given this artificial leg up based on those racist policies of the past, to a lot of white people, then so be it. You can't change those policies because that's not fair to us. Never mind what's fair to you and your people, that's not important. So if your people in the past were shafted, basically, and you didn't benefit from the racist decisions of the past, and we did, well, you know what? That's kind of just the way things are, and that's the way things played out, and sad day for you, tough for you, that's just kind of how the way things are going to be. We're not going to talk about changing that stuff, which is why a lot of people in the dominant society don't agree with reparations. That's why. That's the major reason why they don't support reparations. Okay, because they want to keep those the racist gains that their ancestors passed down to them. They want to keep that in their grasp. They don't want to change that. You get white people who say, well, I didn't do that. Don't hold me accountable, but I'm going to keep all this land that was passed down to me because of those racist policies. I'm going to keep all of this wealth that was accumulated by my ancestors because of the racist laws that were passed to benefit us and oppress you. So you have to understand that when you see some of these people, when you see these articles getting written, when you see these videos being made, even by some people on the left, you have to keep that in mind. Like, you have to understand that they don't really believe in accountability like that. Whereas with a lot of black people, our perspective is different because we were the ones shafted in history. They weren't shafted in history. They were the benefactors of racism in history. Okay, so Julius Malema. Before I say that, so the propaganda that's being stoked now is dangerous too, because there are reports that some of the white rural farmers are arming themselves, and there are articles going back to even like the late 90s talking about how, since the blacks have come into power, the whites have militarized in some ways, and they've been getting military training and whatnot. Now, I don't know how widespread this is, but it's definitely something to be on the lookout for. It's definitely something to watch, because that can definitely become a problem in the future. Because we all know how these alphabet agencies like to arm dissident groups in foreign governments to lead these rebellions and to go on these terrorism campaigns. That is a very common tactic used by intelligence agencies. So when I hear about these white farmers getting military training, that my red flag goes up. That's something people definitely need to be on the lookout for. And Malema has even mentioned that. He's mentioned how white foreigners have been training white South African farmers to be snipers. So this is something that can definitely go down the wrong path and can definitely get a lot worse. Now, Malema has also said something that I think is really important. He said something the other day, and I'm about to play it in a second. He basically threw the racist accusation of white genocide against farmers in South Africa back at Trump and back at the United States by acknowledging what has happened to black people in America is the real genocide. He says that black people face genocide here in America, and that is the truth. And that kind of just shows you that people around the world know what's going on to black people in this country. Everybody around the world knows about how black people are being murdered and how these murders are being covered up by the criminal injustice system. It's not a criminal justice system because there is no justice in this system when it comes to black people. It is an injustice system. It is a judicial system more than anything else. Okay, and we need to change the dialogue on this, and this is why Black and Intellectual exists in the first place, to change the dialogue, because I saw how a lot of this stuff isn't really being how a lot of people kind of try to interpret black suffering a certain way to not make what's going on in America look criminal, which really it is, but much of what's going on to black people in America is criminal. What it is it's just they're not being held accountable for it. Okay, and they have these sort of extrajudicial ways to sort of not hold white supremacists who murder black people accountable in America. But let me digress. I'm gonna play this video of what Malema said, then I'm gonna be back.
We must be prepared for Donald Trump and all of them. We're not scared of them. We remain unshaken. Actually, we are more determined after the Donald Trump tweet to expropriate our land without compensation. There is no white genocide here. It's an absolute rubbish to say there is white genocide. There is black genocide in the USA. They are killing black people in the USA. There is black genocide here in South Africa. Black people are being killed all the time. A farmer has been sentenced to life now recently for having killed a farm worker. Imagine if it was a black person sent life for having killed a white person. It will be news all over. But this black person was killed and a white farmer sent to prison for long time in jail. It's once off reporting and it's done. There's no scientific evidence that points to any white genocide in South Africa. It's not true. And we're not scared of such things. We're not going to be distracted by anyone. Only death will stop us. Not Trump, not poverty, not sanctions. We have all of them in our mind. We know the consequences of what we're asking for. We know it.
So yeah, that was definitely powerful. I saw that video on not on YouTube. I saw it on Twitter, on my Twitter feed, and I was like, okay, yeah, I definitely got to make this South Africa video. Okay, Malema is that dude. Okay, Malema is a real man. Okay, Malema is one of those types of dudes where he doesn't bite his tongue. Like, he doesn't play any games. Like, he's here for keeps. You know, and I definitely support the EFF. I mean, I support the ANC as well. I'm not, you know, the ANC has its role as well, and they have their role to play as well. But the EFF definitely is an organization, a political party that I think it definitely needs to be supported. I always support the leftist parties and the leftist groups in foreign countries, whether it's South Africa, whether it's Brazil. Brazil has some leftist groups that definitely should be supported. The leftist groups are always groups that I look out for, because that's usually where you get a lot of the truth. Because what you'll find is a lot of the establishment parties, and not just in America, but in foreign countries as well, the establishment parties typically, they kind of concede to the power structure in many ways. Man, that's across the board. Whether you look at the establishment in the United States, South Africa, Brazil, wherever, the European Union, wherever, whoever is in power, there's an incentive to maintain the status quo. Okay, so sometimes you have to look at the leftist groups who are considered to be more fringe, or quote unquote far left, to get a little bit more of the truth, because they're not in power. And there's a reason that they're not in power. Okay. Now, actually, the EFF, they actually do hold some power, and that's because of the parliamentary system in South Africa. That they're allowed to hold some power and some political power in that country. Now before I end this video, something else you're hearing a lot with South Africa. You're hearing people call, and this is why I didn't include a lot of the Western news articles in this video, because you consistently see people try to compare what's going on in South Africa to Zimbabwe. You're hearing people call it Zimbabwe 2.0. That's a faulty comparison for several reasons, but you'll see a lot of people compare what's happening in South Africa to Zimbabwe, because Zimbabwe reclaimed a lot of their land from white farmers, because a lot of the white farmers in Zimbabwe got that land when Zimbabwe was formerly known as Rhodesia. Okay, the racist, Nazi supporting government of Rhodesia, the far right, fascist government of Rhodesia. A lot of the white farmers still had that land when the blacks came into power. And the black people in Zimbabwe were like, look, we're going to take some of this land back. Okay, and so they had a series of disputes with white landowners in their country as well. And people point to Zimbabwe as some sort of proof that, well, you see, reclaiming land from whites to help blacks, that doesn't work. That's the underlying statement that's being made. But what people don't tell you is about something called Zindera or Zidera. Okay, they don't talk about that. Zidera stands for the Zimbabwe Democracy and Economic Recovery Act. Okay, these were sanctions placed on Zimbabwe, economic sanctions, originally enacted by the U.S. Congress in 2001. Okay, and the sanctions dealt with a lot of different issues, but the most important underlying issue of Zidera, I might be pronouncing it or mispronouncing it. The underlying issue was land reform. Okay, that's the reason the United States Congress placed sanctions on Zimbabwe to begin with. That was the main reason when the Zimbabwe government started reclaiming that land from white farmers. The U.S. government slapped sanctions on them. Okay. And this definitely had a negative impact on the economy. So you see, people don't like to say that because then you can't say it's purely the land reformation alone that did it. You know, people try to make it seem like it's the land reformation in and of itself that caused the economic downturn in Zimbabwe. They don't mention the sanctions. Okay, you have to include the actions of the foreign governments like my own as well, that also played a role in tanking the Zimbabwe economy, but also the European Union. The European Union also put economic sanctions on Zimbabwe. Okay, so you have to tell the whole story. You can't just tell part of the story. So what people are really saying underneath the surface, and you know, if you read between the lines, what people are really saying is, yeah, you know, South Africa, if you do this, you know, the white governments of, you know, Europe and America, you know, they're going to place sanctions on you, right? And they're honestly, some people are low key calling for it. That's why they keep bringing it up. That's why they keep bringing up Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe is code for economic sanctions. Okay, so that's just, you know, that's just my 2 cents about what's going on in South Africa. I don't want to keep the video going too long. As more happens, I will make more videos in the future. I'll try to make another video. I won't have it be, you know, 5 months apart, because my last video that I made was made 5 months ago. So I'm definitely gonna watch this issue closely. Okay, and I think we all should watch this issue closely, because, you know, what good is black-owned media if we're gonna do nothing but parrot white-owned media? What good are we really doing? We're just putting a black face on white propaganda. Okay, we have to have our own way of interpreting stories. We have to have our own way of talking about issues that face black people in America and black people abroad. That is the only way we're going to differentiate ourselves from everybody else. So that's what Black and Intellectual is about. That's what, you know, a lot of other, you know, black social media, you know, commentators, that's what they're about. So definitely check out my blog at www.blackandintellectual.com. Opt into my mailing list to stay abreast of my new postings and my new writings. Follow me on YouTube. Click the bell underneath this video to keep abreast of whenever I post new videos. And thanks for watching this video, and I will see you later.